Good evening. I'd like to call a regular council meeting of Monday, September 28th to order at 6 p.m. I'd like to welcome all members of the public who are viewing our council meeting this evening via live stream, or if you're viewing the video recorded on our website after the meeting. I'd like to, I'm Mayor Cliff McNeil-Smith, and joining me here in the chamber is Councillor Rintoul to my left and Councillor Garnett to my right. We are continuing to have our council meetings in the COVID pandemic as a hybrid with members in attendance and members via teleconference, and our four council colleagues are joining us via Zoom. Councillors Duncan, Councillors Fallett, Councillor O'Keefe, and Councillor Wainwright. Good evening. And also joining us are several staff. We have our CEO, Mr. Humble, our CFO, Mr. Hissick, our current manager of, senior manager of current planning, Ms. Verhagen, our Senior Manager of Long Range Planning, Mr. Newcomb, our Director of Engineering Works and Parks, Ms. Clary, our Fire and Rescue Chief, Mr. Mickelson, our Corporate Officer, Ms. Nelson, and our IT person who keeps this running, Mr. Maxwell. Good evening. I'd now like to first acknowledge respectfully that we're holding our meeting in the territory of the Wasanish Nation. And before I look for a motion to approve our agenda, we do have additional late items. Under 4A, the cannabis retail application, we have 3 new submissions from the public that were received after the agenda went out on Thursday. And under item 5B, the Sydney Pier Hotel and Spa sign application, we have received 11 submissions from the public after the agenda went out. Under 7A, the Blue Heron Park turf proposal, we have a second staff report and a new consideration based on information received last Friday. And lastly, under item 17, we have a notice of motion from Councillor Rintoul arising from an Economic Advisory Committee meeting also held on Friday.
I'll move approval as amended.
Second.
All those in favor? Not opposed, the motion carries. Thank you. Normally we have a single public participation period lasting 20 minutes where speakers can speak on any topic on the agenda. This evening we have 2 public participation periods. We have the general period, and then we have a special public participation opportunity for the Happy Buddha Cannabis Retail License application. We have no speakers this evening in the general public participation period, so I'll move directly to the special public participation opportunity. And I'd first like to note that in our council procedures bylaw under public participation, it is normally a limit of 20 minutes for speaker, and our bylaw says approximately 3 minutes for speaker. I would ask that council consider, we have 17 speakers this evening under the special public participation opportunity. I would ask council to consider a resolution extending public participation to hear all speakers and to have a time limit of 4 minutes to be fair to all of our speakers this evening.
I'll move to extend the special public participation period in order to hear all speakers, limited to 4 minutes per registered speaker.
Second.
Thank you. Discussion? I'll call the question. All in favor? None opposed. The motion carries. Thank you. So I will now open the special public participation period, and we do, as I mentioned, have 17 registered speakers. They are all participating via teleconference, via Zoom. We have them in a waiting room, and we will be admitting them, and I will be indicating to them that they have 4 minutes and that we have a timer, and we'll give them 1 minute's notice for them to finish. So I'd first like to call upon our first speaker. So to our first speaker, Miss Hazelhurst. Okay, can you hear me, Miss Hazelhurst?
Still connecting.
We'll be patient this evening with the technology.
Hello?
Can you hear me, Miss Hazelhurst?
Yes.
Yes, good evening. You have 4 minutes to speak. We do have a timer to be fair to all speakers this evening. And I will give you 1 minute's notice to the end. And you have the floor for 4 minutes. And thank you.
Thank you. Having read the Vancouver Island Health Authority policy on a public health approach to non-medical cannabis, I feel a 2410 Beacon Avenue, Sydney location for a recreational cannabis retail store is inappropriate. According to Vancouver Island Health Authority, a balance between the intended benefits and expected harms from a recreational cannabis retail store must be achieved. They outline their concerns and recommendations, including increasing public knowledge and awareness to support risk reduction and destigmatization without normalization or promotion. They also recommend establishing buffer zones of 300 meters and preferably 600 meters between cannabis retail outlets and schools, recreational centers, and other areas where children and youth frequent. Beacon Avenue is Sydney's high-profile, high-traffic main street where family events take place during the year. Locating a recreational cannabis retail store in the middle of Beacon Avenue could make it appear that Sydney was promoting and normalizing the use of recreational cannabis here. Such a store should be at a different location and not on our main street. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hazelhurst. We'd ask that you exit the Zoom call. We do have 17 speakers, and please feel free to resume viewing our webcast live. I'll now turn to our next speaker, Ms. Pendergast. Okay, we'll move to our next speaker, Mr. Chalevin. Can you hear me? Good evening, Mr. Chalevin.
Good evening.
We have allocated 4 minutes for speakers this evening. We do have a timer to be fair to all speakers. And we'd ask you to give your name and address, and please, you have the floor.
Certainly. My name is John Trelevin, 51134 3rd Street in Sydney, where I've been a resident since 2005. I'm speaking tonight both as a resident and taxpayer in Sydney and as a member of the Board of Directors of the Saanich Peninsula Chamber of Commerce. Our membership is strongly in favor of supporting Brad and Cindy's application for a cannabis retail operation on Beacon Avenue, as am I personally. There are times when councils can do things. It's true. And this is one of them. You can make this decision. But there are issues, many, and probably all of them, where what's important is what you should do for the community. And I first of all want to commend Brad and Cindy for their patience, their diligence. As you know, their current business is in the telecommunications sector, a sector heavy in compliance. So they're used to providing service to clients in a highly regulated industry. In choosing to risk their capital to take advantage of an industry that has been legalized by the federal government, in which the province of British Columbia is a major vendor of product and licensor, they are well aware that they're moving into yet another heavily regulated industry in which compliance is critical. I believe that their background, both in business and in a compliance-related industry, is important to assuring some people who are a little bit concerned about locating this business on Beacon Avenue in an area zoned for cannabis retail on the main street, a legal business, that this is going to be just fine. I guess what I would say finally is that we are in extraordinary circumstances. This is a period, I don't have to tell you, in which the business risks have skyrocketed and businesses are closing. This was not the environment in which Brad and Cindy began this journey. The fact is they've continued on this journey in a time when, regrettably, in many communities, de-investment is going to be happening.
You have 1 minute. You have 1 minute, Mr. Sullivan.
Thank you. I think it's an extremely important opportunity for this council in supporting their application to send a signal that in these troubled times, Sydney is really open for business and embracing change. A support for this motion will further indicate that Sydney is in Canada. The federal government has legalized cannabis consumption and retail. And in the province of British Columbia, which the provincial government is the major vendor, I see no reason whatsoever for this council to stand in the way of this investment, which is meant to serve the needs of this community and the community beyond Sydney and the Saanich Peninsula. And I would urge all councillors to support the work that Brad and Cindy have put into this.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Sullivan.
I'll just let me say that Clarence Bolt's letters have been tremendous.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sullivan. We would ask that you exit the Zoom call. We do have 17 speakers, and please, we welcome you to join the live webcast through our website.
Thank you.
Sorry. Okay. Good evening, Mr. Fraker. Can you hear? I believe you're on mute, Mr. Fraker.
Okay.
Mr. Fraker, we do have 4 minutes for each speaker this evening, to be fair. We do have a timer, and I will certainly give you a 60 seconds notice, but you have the floor. Please give us your name and address.
Sure. My interest in the marijuana shop relates to my wife's need for medical marijuana. She has Parkinson's disease and...
Sorry, your name and address, Mr. Fraker?
I'm sorry?
Sorry, your name and address, please.
Oh, I'm sorry, Mark Fraker, F-R-A-K-E-R, and the address is 8617 Lockside Drive.
Thank you.
And as I was saying, my wife has Parkinson's disease. Before she was prescribed medical marijuana, she was taking enormous numbers of muscle relaxants to control muscle spasms. And since she's been taking medical marijuana, she has not had to use any of the Roboxacet, which is what she had been using. And she's made an enormous difference. We currently get it from a supplier in Saskatchewan, and if we could get it locally, that would be all the better. And I think that really sums up what I wanted to say.
Thank you, Mr. Fraker, for your comments. We'd invite you to exit the call. We have 17 speakers, and please feel welcome to join our live webcast available on our website.
Very good.
Thank you. Okay. Good evening, Ms. Pendergast. Can you hear me? I believe you're on mute. Our live webcast available on our website. Ms. Pendergast?
Very good.
Thank you. Can you hear me, Ms. Pendergast?
I can. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We
Yep.
were having some
Yep.
technical issues. We actually hadn't received an invite until just a moment ago. So thank you for that.
Okay, if I can just speak for a moment. We do have 17 speakers, and council has agreed to have each speaker 4 minutes, and we will give you 60 seconds before the end. We'd ask you to give your name and address, and you have the floor for 4 minutes.
Thank you very much. My name again is Cindy Pendergast, and my commercial address is 2410 Beacon
Our
Avenue
live webcast
in
available on our
Sydney.
website. Ms. Pendergast?
Yes,
Thank you. Can you hear me, Ms. Pendergast?
yes,
I can. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We
Yep.
were having some
Yep.
technical issues. We actually hadn't received an invite until just a moment ago. So thank you for that.
Okay, if I can just speak for a moment. We do have 17 speakers, and council has agreed to have each speaker Ms. Pendergast, 4 minutes, and we give you 60 seconds. You are listening to the delay. If you could give your name and address, and you have the floor for 4 minutes. Ms. Pendergast, if you could turn the live stream off, you're replaying.
And my commercial address
I
is
will.
2410
Thank you.
Beacon Avenue in Sydney.
Thank you very much. Are you still able to see me?
We're able to hear you now and see you, and please, you have 4 minutes.
All right, thank you very much. Again, my name is Cindy Pendergast, in case anyone didn't hear the previous 6 times. My commercial address is 2410 Beacon Avenue in Sydney, and I want to, of course, thank you all for seeing us again this evening. I am here with Brad and Zach, and we are here to request a positive referral back to the LCRB for our retail licensed cannabis application. We have all had quite a journey together over the last 18 months. There have been a few hairpin turns, and we have had some help from friends, new and old, to get to the point that we are at today. We have navigated successfully a window which, thankfully, the province changed some of the requirements on, and we're able to offer you what you wanted in the first place and what, truthfully, we wanted as well, which is a very active, live, and fun window. We know we must keep a very high bar if you are to permit us to be the first licensed cannabis retailers in Sydney, and we anticipate doing that with pleasure. Thank you again to the over 300 supporters who wrote in and emailed us privately and stopped us on the street and said, good luck, and we wish you well. Many people, such as the previous speaker, have spoken about medical needs and wanting to come into a friendly store. We certainly hope that we will be that, and we again are anticipating, hopefully, a positive referral this evening. We are going to do, with your help, what we always said we would do, which is to get there together. We hope to bring lots of positives to Sydney, not only, of course, our store, but great ambience and hopefully some of the things that we can do for charity as well. I'm going to close very quickly this evening, and again, just thank you to all of our supporters. Thank you to Brad and Zach, who have been so amazing in coming along this journey with me, and I will close that way. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Pendergast. We would ask that you exit the Zoom call and feel free to continue watching the live cast. Thank you.
Go into your email.
Coming along this journey with me, and I will close that way. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Pendergast. We would ask that you exit the Zoom call and feel free to continue watching the live broadcast. Mr. Stiles. Good evening, Mr. Stiles. Can you hear me?
I don't zoom in all anymore. I can't hear anything. Okay.
Good evening, Mr. Stiles. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Welcome. Each speaker has 4 minutes this evening. We will give you a minute before the end, and we'd ask you to give your name and address, and you have the floor for 4 minutes.
Sure, absolutely. Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, council, staff, and general public. I am Brad Stiles, one of the co-founders of Happy Buddha at 2410 Beacon Avenue. And thank you, everyone, for taking the time to join us tonight on Zoom. I'd like to start tonight by saying, wow, this has been quite the process. I know it's been new for council. It's been new for us as well. But we are here tonight, and hopefully we get some resolution. And I'd also like to offer my support, of course, for our application at 2410 Beacon Avenue. We're 100% compliant in all ways on both the municipal and the provincial scale. We've had overwhelming public support of 311 to 37. Thank you for that, Sydney, and the businesses of Sydney. That's almost 90%. So that's fantastic. In addition, we can now offer you, Cindy mentioned this, the window that you wanted in the first place. Of course, the LCRB changed the regulation in June to allow for clear windows. So we can offer you the window that you wanted, and that will be vibrant, current, and compelling. Exactly, again, what you guys wanted. Cindy, Zach, and I are tenacious business people, and we never give up. We'll be a great addition, to the Sydney business community and to the town itself. And in closing, we're just looking for a positive referral tonight back to the LCRB, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Stiles. We'd ask that you exit the call. We do have 17 speakers, and please feel free to continue watching via our live stream.
Absolutely, thank you.
Good evening, Mr. Bolt. Can you hear me? I see you're just on mute.
There, is that better?
Yes, good evening.
Good evening.
Each speaker does have 4 minutes this evening. We do have 17 speakers. We'd ask that you give your name and address, and we'll give you 1 minute before the end, and you have the floor for 4 minutes.
Okay, thank you. It's Clarence Bolt, 9659 2nd Street in Sydney. And I'll try to keep it short here. First of all, there are 4 things that I would like to point out that have been established. Yes? Yes, I can.
We can hear you, Mr. Bolt. If you have the live stream on, Mr. Bolt, we'd suggest you disconnect. There is a lag.
Okay. Is that better?
Yes, we can hear you.
You got it?
The floor is yours.
Got it. Okay. There were 2 places to end. Thank you.
Mr. Bolt, I think you're listening to the live stream. And there is a lag between the live stream and live here in the chamber.
Got it.
Okay,
Okay.
you're good to go, sir.
Okay. Thank you. I guess got my address in that?
You bet.
Yeah. Okay. I'd like to point out that a number of things that have been established and that are settled and that I guess are sort of beyond or non-issues. The first is that the sale of cannabis in Canada is legal. It's been so since 2018. So the legality and the questions of legality are a non-issue. The second set of comments have to do with the Liquor and Cannabis Regulation Branch, LCRB. And just to point out that cannabis stores have to meet their requirements and regulations about all sorts of things like location, security, display, and so forth. And that the applicants have met those requirements. And then the next step was to send it to you for referral for comment. And then they required, as you know, the notification and consultation process to the community, specifically laying out to whom neighboring businesses, residents, institutions, and so forth, but also the general public. You did so. 348 people responded, 9-to-1 ratio, 300 supported plus, including, I must point out, a large number, majority of businesses right around where the applicant has the proposed cannabis retail store have supported it. And as you heard earlier, the Chamber of Commerce. The third is the town of Sydney. And I think it must be clear here that Sydney, in fact, showed that it supported the idea of cannabis retail because it amended its bylaw to allow cannabis retail anywhere in the commercial zone. And it passed policy guidelines. And the staff report of August 4th noted 4 areas that were of particular importance: location, store building facade treatment, 3, the community impact, and safety and security. And I think it's really important that staff didn't flag any concerns about the application in terms of meeting what Sydney required, both in terms of zoning and policy requirements. So, of course, I don't have to review those because you have the report. The fourth area has to do with VIHA. And I indicated in this in my letter to council as well. It's been off-quoted in council chambers, but what I find most interesting when you read the report closely, it fully supports regulated retail cannabis outlets. And the quote is that reduce the negative outcomes associated with illicit distribution and poor outcomes from prohibition. In other words, it noted that what we had was not working and that retail outlets are important. And it notes that alcohol, tobacco, and opioids cause greater overall burden and injury than cannabis. And the report talks about risk reduction and destigmatization. And the Oxford English Dictionary defines destigmatization as removing negative associations from something once regarded as shameful or disgraceful. I think that's something that keeps coming up in this conversation, as if there's something shameful or disgraceful about cannabis retail.
You have 1 minute, Mr. Bolt.
Okay. VIHA did suggest restricting public consumption, reducing unintended exposure to youth. Those are all things that Sydney and LCRB would agree with and that the applicants would too. So just in a quick summary, the application complies with all the conditions required and suggested by the LCRB, Sydney, and VIHA, and is confirmed by the staff report and then supported by the community in a 9-to-1 ratio. And for that reason, I cannot see why council would even consider denying the application. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bolt. We'd ask you to exit Zoom, and we have 17 speakers, and invite you to continue watching on our live stream. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry, Michael Smith. Sorry, I'm not seeing her. Okay, just waiting for the audio. Mr. Atchison, can you hear me? I see you're just.
I'm just. Can you see me now or hear me now?
Yes. Good evening. We can see and hear you. I just note that each speaker does have 4 minutes this evening. We'd ask you to give your name and address and at the start, and we'll let you know when there's 1 minute before the end, and you have the floor.
Oh, great. I don't think I'll be that long anyway. Good evening. My name is Lee Aitchison. I live on the peninsula. I'm on Highgate Road in Cadova Bay, and I do shop regularly in Sydney. It gives me an opportunity to support small business and get some exercise in such a beautiful and walkable community such as Sydney is. About 18 months ago, my wife, Sandra, and I discovered the benefits of using CBD oil and topicals. Sandra during pre and post surgery, and me in treating sort of the aches and joint pain that seemed to have arrived since I turned 60. So we've become sort of proponents of using CBD and find it very beneficial for us. I believe that a retail outlet such as Happy Buddha would provide Sandra and I with a greater opportunity for purchasing options and a higher level of convenience, and another additional opportunity to support small business in the community of Sydney. So I do urge you to approve the application. And thank you, Mayor and Council, for giving the opportunity to provide this input.
Thank you, Mr. Aitchison, for your comments this evening. We'd ask that you exit the Zoom call and welcome you to continue watching via the live stream available on our website.
Oh, great. Sorry, I'm not sure I hope you could see me there. I don't know where my camera is exactly on my iPad here, but so I'll do that. I'm not sure exactly how, but I'll figure it out and watch the rest of the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you again. I'm not seeing the name. Good evening, Mr. Foss. Can you hear me? I see that you're just unmuting.
I can hear you, yes.
Mr. Foss, each speaker does have 4 minutes this evening. We'd ask that you give your name and address, and we'll let you know 1 minute before the end, and you now have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My name's Ian Foss. I'm a resident of Sydney. I live at 2254 Malibu Avenue. I'd just like to request that the mayor and council support this application. My elderly parents, my dad, my stepmom, and my mother all live in town, and they all use cannabis products, CBD oil and topicals for pain and to assist them in sleep. Having a store located in Sydney itself would actually be quite convenient for them and me, who would shop for them. My wife and I also use these products to help us sleep, also for pain after surgery. Our son uses them, CBDs and whatnot, for pain relief, and he's been able to get off opioids after surgery using these products. So I think there's quite a benefit to using these, and there's other stores that sell other products that are similar in our town, and I feel that this should be supported for those reasons. I think that there's a great number of other reasons as well. There's quite a number of empty storefronts on Beacon Avenue right now, and it'd be nice to see another one filled. I think these two owners have done a number of things, and reading the entities or the entries on their storefront on a regular basis, I feel that they've done quite a bit to meet with the requests of the town and over the last year. And again, I think it should be supported. That's all I've got for today. Thank you for your time, Mayor and Council.
Thank you, Mr. Foss. We'd ask that you exit the Zoom call and invite you to continue watching the meeting via our live stream on the website. Good evening, Mr. Angus. Can you hear us? I see that you're just unmuting.
Yes, I can.
Mr. Angus, each speaker has 4 minutes this evening, to be fair to all, and we'll let you know a minute before the end. Please give us your name and address, and you have the floor for 4 minutes.
Richard Angus, 2115 Amelia Avenue, Sydney.
Go ahead, sir.
I don't get to see a picture?
No, we can see you, sir, and we can hear your audio. You can hear our audio.
As a person who spent their whole life in technology, I must tell you I'm rather disappointed in this. I am a citizen of this town, and I, as many old people do, suffer from the fact that I don't sleep very well on occasion, and I also suffer from the pains of arthritis. While visiting friends in California, I was introduced to medicinal cannabis and found that it was the best solution to either of those problems that I've found. And I wish I could purchase it in my own town without having to drive someplace else to get it. Beacon Avenue in this town has been declining for the last while, and here we have two people who have done everything they can to stay within the regulations and guidelines that have been set up both federally and provincially, and are willing to pay rent and taxes and purchase services locally. And for some reason, they're being denied it. Now, I've known these two people for several years. And in all the years traveling around the world and working around the world, they are a couple of the most honest and honorable people that I have had the pleasure to encounter. And this town would benefit from their presence as people working within the town and working for the benefit of the town. I just can't understand why we don't give them that opportunity. I would also like to, in signing off, say that I am very concerned about the amount of money that this council spent on lawyers and courts fighting these people who, to all appearances, have done absolutely everything that was required of them by the regulations, both federal and provincial. And I think that was an extreme waste of our taxpayers' money. And I do hope that you will do the correct thing and give them the permission to open their store. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Angus, for your comments. Please invite you to continue watching a live stream where you will have video of the council chamber. Good evening, Mr. Bernard. Can you hear me? I see that you're just unmuting.
Yes, I can hear you just fine.
Thank you. Each speaker does have 4 minutes this evening. We'll let you know a minute before the end. We'd ask that you give your name and address, and you have the floor for 4 minutes.
Thank you very much. Good evening, Mayor and Council, and thank you for this opportunity. I will be brief, much less than 4 minutes. My name is Scott Bernard, and I reside at 815 Pepin Place. I work in North Saanich and have frequent occasion to conduct banking and shopping activities on Beacon Avenue. And my purpose today is to register my support for the application before you. I first met the applicants when they relocated their mobile phone business to the Royal Oak Shopping Centre in Saanich. At that time, I was a retail business owner at the Plaza, located a few doors from them until I sold it in 2018. Throughout, they were exemplary business neighbors and worked tirelessly to grow both their business and strengthen relationships at the shopping center. We have kept in touch, and I know them to be passionate towards their professional interests and pursuits. My hope is you will look favorably upon their application this evening, as it is my belief their operation would favorably complement the business landscape in the area. Once again, I thank you most sincerely for this opportunity.
Thank you, Mr. Bernard. We invite you to continue watching via our website on live stream. Thank you. Okay. Good evening, Mr. Grenner. Can you hear me? I see you're just unmuting.
Can you hear me?
Yes, good evening, Mr. Grenner. Each speaker does have 4 minutes this evening. We'll let you know a minute before the end. We'd ask that you give your name and address, and you have the floor for 4 minutes.
Okay, thank you. My name's Sid Greener. I live at 2011 Linda Place in Sydney, and I'm a casual user of marijuana, trying to help my sleep problems. Recently, I brought some marijuana on the black market, but I'd far prefer to buy market in a local licensed facility, and I fully support the Happy Booty application on Beacon Street in Sydney. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Greener. We'd ask you to invite you to continue watching our live stream on our website.
Okay, thank you.
Good evening, Mr. Alexander. Can you hear me?
User of marijuana.
Yes, I can hear you.
Mr. Alexander, if you could disconnect your live stream, it just is a delay with the live in the council chamber.
Done.
Thank you. We do have 4 minutes per speaker this evening. We'll let you know a minute before the end. We'd ask you to give your name and address, and you have the floor for 4 minutes, sir.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. My name is John Alexander. My address is 26 Bastion Square, Victoria, BC. First, I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to make this hearing and this council meeting available. The efforts of all of us to keep most of our community activities going during the COVID-19 pandemic is laudable, and the town of Sydney and its staff has done a very, very good job of achieving the results and keeping your community safe. And I say that particularly because my 95-year-old mother continues to live in her own home in Sydney, and so I'm grateful for the safe community. My clients obviously appreciate the opportunity to have council address the cannabis retail location referral. I acted for them in the court proceedings earlier this year, and I'm not going to address any of those past proceedings or get into any legal argument in front of you tonight. But I thought it would be helpful to set out what it is that the province seeks from you, from the council, in these referrals. So this is a referral from the province. The application of Ms. Pendergast was made to the province, and the province has asked the municipal council to comment on the application back to the province. So it's important to understand that role, and I think it's important for the public to understand that role. The province considers most of the aspects of retail cannabis store operations. They do ask local governments, municipal councils, to comment on the location of proposed retail stores. And that's obviously because local governments are involved in land use planning, zoning, where various uses are located in their municipalities. And they ask you to comment specifically and provide your advice to the province on whether the issuance of the license may affect nearby residents. And these are words that are in the provincial legislation, may affect nearby residents. Yes, of course, you're also entitled to consider the general impact on the community. And in my submission, you have a good basis to do that with the many, many comments that you have received in response to the process that you put in place over the last month or so. So this matter also comes back to you by way of a court order that was made earlier in the summer. And there the court focused this application a little more and focused a little more on what the court considered you should be commenting back to the province. And in the order,
Mr. Alexander, you have 1 minute. Thank you.
The court was satisfied that the location may affect nearby residents, and they asked you to gather comments as to whether those impacts are positive or negative. Now, I'm giving this because I think it's useful not only for council to understand what their role is, but for the public to understand what council's role is. It's not for the council to look at the wider issues. The Parliament of Canada has dealt with the legality of cannabis. The province has dealt with almost everything about how to regulate the retail sale of cannabis, but they do want this input from the council. And so hopefully that helps you in making your decision and justifying your decision to the public as to why you're looking at a fairly narrow area in which to comment back, which is the location of the store, general community impact on that location, and impact on nearby residents. So I hope that's helpful, and thank you very much for, again, for giving me the opportunity to do this in a safe manner. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Alexander. We invite you to continue watching via our live stream. Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Pisker. I see that you are just unmuting. Can you hear me? Good evening. Can you hear me, sir?
Okay. Yeah. Are you talking to me now?
Yes, I'm addressing Mr. Pisker.
Yes.
Each speaker does have 4 minutes this evening. We will let you know a minute before the end. We ask that you give your name and address, and you have the floor for 4 minutes, sir.
Okay. Thank you to Mayor and Council. Thank you for the opportunity to participate. My name is Richard Pisker. I'm a retired physicist and university administrator. I currently live on Pender Island at 4321 Fort Washington Road. Formerly resided on the Saanich Peninsula, and upon retirement in 2012, moved to Pender Island, where we now have a farming business. Our banking is in Sydney. We regularly shop in Sydney. Sydney, as you know, is the go-to shopping area for many Pender Islanders. I had previously outlined my support for Brad and Cindy, who I've known for more than 10 years, in previous correspondence in August and again in October. As I pointed out, these are community-minded, respectful, professional business people. But what I want to do is talk a little bit about the cannabis experience on Pender Island and how it relates to the situation, I believe, in Sydney. Our population on Pender is roughly 1/5 that of Sydney, with a very similar demographic of seniors. There is a government liquor store, a private liquor store, and off sales from our neighborhood pub. We have one major shopping area, and that's the Driftwood Center. It's always been a challenge to businesses on Pender Island, and particularly now. One of the stores in the Driftwood Center had been vacant for a number of years. What had happened was there was a proposal to open a cannabis store in this location, and this location is between a bookstore and a real estate office. It met all legal requirements, and to date it's been very successful. It's interesting that the majority of clients are seniors, and that many of the popular products are edibles and not smoking products. There have been no problems whatsoever, and this cannabis store has been well supported by the people of Pender. And I believe the same is true for the cannabis store in Sydney. I think Sydney Council needs to recognize that this proposal from Brad and Cindy meets all legal requirements. I think it's time to put aside any personal feelings and any prejudices, as cannabis is a legal product, both federally and provincially, and your staff report indicates that this proposal is in full compliance with regulations. The many supporters of this proposal have outlined the many positive aspects for the town of Sydney. So with that, I urge Council to approve this proposal. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, Mr. Pisker. We invite you to continue watching via our live stream as you wish.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Good evening, Mr. McNeil. Can you hear me? I see that you're just unmuting.
Unmute. Okay, there.
Good evening, Mr. McNeil. Speakers do have 4 minutes each this evening. We'd ask you to give your name and address, and you have the floor for 4 minutes, sir.
Well, thank you, and thank you to the mayor. Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council. Harold McNeil. I live at 4402 Lene Place in Royal Oak, and I'm a frequent shopper in Sydney, having a family who live out that way, so I'm frequently in North Saanich and Sydney. And also, I shop frequently at the Bell Store in Royal Oak Shopping Center. I've known Brad and Cindy for about 5 years now, and they have been extremely helpful. We have a son who has some disabilities, and they've worked with him regularly to help him keep his audio equipment working and everything like that. I really only want to emphasize that Brad and Cindy will be a great addition to your business community in Sydney. They're caring and people who run a business, and it's an ethical business, and they have worked hard to meet all the requirements that you've set before them in the path to get this business license in Sydney. I'm not going to go beyond that because all the other speakers have spoken very favorably towards this permit, business license being issued. And I do hope that tonight you'll find it a way to approve their business license application. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. McNeil, for your comments. We invite you to continue watching via live stream on our website. Thank you again.
Thank you.
We're just trying to connect to the next speaker. It may just be another moment here. Good evening, Ms. Dunford. Can you hear me? We're not sure you're connected via audio yet. Good evening, Ms. Dunford. Can you hear me? I see that you're just unmuting now. Just another step to unmute there.
I'm unmuted now.
Oh, good evening. Speakers do have 4 minutes this evening each. We'll give you a minute before the end. We'd ask to give your name and address, and you have the floor for 4 minutes.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you very much. Good evening, Mr. Mayor and council members. My name is Wilhelmina Dunford, 1886 Mount Newton Crossroad in Central Saanich. I work at Newport Realty at 244 Beacon Avenue, and this office would be considered to be close proximity of the applicant's business address. I am also a property owner in Sydney and believe that with the many new condo developments under construction, we have to think about the future of Sydney. We do not need empty storefronts. I have known Cindy and Brad for approximately 8 years. I garnered them with great respect, both as business owners and friends. It is time to get the application for Cindy and Brad approved. Sydney has run out of reasons to delay their application. Get the store open so it can make a difference to those who rely on cannabis use for both medicinal and recreational use. I'm not a user myself, and I believe, like most of us represented here, I'm not in a position to judge those who use the product. We rely on the expertise of those that legalize this product to have done their homework. The Cannabis Act took a long time to come about. The purpose of the act was to protect the health of young persons by restricting the access to cannabis, to provide for legal and controlled production of cannabis, to reduce illicit activities in relation to the use of cannabis. But the key to the act was to provide access to a quality controlled supply of cannabis. Cindy and Brad have a huge public support. They have the approval from provincial and federal regulators and the BC courts. Sydney has the zoning, Sydney has the backing from property owners, and Brad and Cindy have the support of the business community. You all must vote and represent the majority of who want this store. You as elected representatives of Sydney cannot have a personal agenda. You are here to represent the majority. Please let's have these well-intentioned owners get on with it. We as a municipality have already cost them thousands of dollars with different tactics to stall and delay the process. So please vote yes for tonight. And thank you for your time.
Thank you for your comments, Ms. Dunford. We invite you to continue watching via the live stream on our website. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
So we're done? Okay, so we have no further speakers in this special public participation opportunity. I want to thank all of the speakers who did join us this evening, and I'll bring the special public participation opportunity session to a close. So we'll now turn to this matter as an agenda item, and we have a report from staff dated September 23rd, and I would ask council to consider moving the first option for discussion, as the second option involves more detail, and which we can get to depending on how we vote on the first option.
I'll move that council direct staff to provide the following response to the Liquor and Cannabis Regulation Branch. 1. The Town of Sydney recommends that a cannabis retail store license for Happy Buddha Cannabis to be located at 2410 Beacon Avenue be issued on the basis that the application is generally consistent with the Town of Sydney Liquor and Cannabis Licensing Policy Number DV015. 2. The view of the Town of Sydney is that although there might be some negative impacts, on balance, the general impact of the proposed cannabis retail store on the community will be either minimal or generally positive. And further, that council directs staff to provide the LCRB with a copy of all of the written responses received in response to the public notification of the Happy Buddha Cannabis referral. A summary of any response provided in person at the September 28, 2020 council meeting, and a description of the methods used to gather those views.
Do we have a seconder?
Second.
Seconded by Councillor Wainwright. I'll open it for discussion. I'll turn to Councillor Rintoul and then Councillor Fallett.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was reluctant to speak, but I want to make clear my position with respect to this matter, which is certainly an outcome of the public consultation process, and in large part from some of the comments and being able to hear and see those participants who joined us this evening. I do continue to admire the applicant's entrepreneurial spirit And Ms. Pendergrass and Mr. Stiles have done a very good job of getting letters of support from a broad representation in this community and beyond. Our staff report certainly indicated that it was a requirement for the town to gather the views of nearby residents. And it seems as if this has been successful and also has received the support of the local business community in the form of the Saanich Peninsula Chamber. I've seen many friends who've taken time to submit their feedback to council, and I appreciate that so many respondents have an interest in the future of our community. Personally, I subscribe to the position that Island Health has taken. In their letter to the town of Sydney, Island Health states that by making it less normative, it is more likely that youth delay or never start cannabis consumption. I believe normalization associated with cannabis sales on our main street sends the wrong message to youth in our community. However, I have listened. I have seen the sales of other products on our main street that youth have been exposed to, and I believe that it is the responsibility of the community as a whole to help foster and guide their decision making. And so, although it disappoints me personally, I will support the motion this evening, as a majority of residents and respondents have supported this application. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I'll turn to Councillor Fallot.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. When this application first came before us, my concern was then the impact of a window on Beacon Avenue that was not conducive to enjoyable browsers looking at an active storefront. And those were the requirements from the LCRB, and that was something that the store had to do. I admired the entrepreneurial spirit of the Pendergasts and felt that they put a good business plan together. My objection was the storefront. And we've had an incredible amount of feedback from the community, both the direct near community and from people from further away that say they participate in the business aspects of the town. We've heard from the chamber, we've heard from different business owners, and I sit here tonight listening to this presentation, and I will take what we've heard from the community and what my first objections were, which are no longer valid, which was the window display that has now been changed by the provincial government, and the requirements are different, and I will support this application. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Fallot. I'll turn to Councillor Wainwright.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I will be fairly brief in my comments. This is a difficult decision for the community because we have people for and we have people against who have very strongly held opinions. And then we have probably the majority of Sydney somewhere between those two things. I think that every member of council should explain their reasons for however they're going to vote tonight, because our community deserves to know where we stand. I'm not going to go on at length because I voted in favor the last time and I explained myself last time. But one of the pieces of information that is new to me from the first time we voted on this, legalization of cannabis was newer because it was quite a while ago. And the majority of cannabis sales were still black market. It was something around 75% being purchased on the black market. And now, with the legal regime having been in place longer, they're now up to about 50% being purchased from legal sources. So this is having an effect of reducing the criminal element. And I think that is actually an important objective, because some of this black market sales is, well, it's all unregulated product, but some of it is untrustworthy, and it's contaminated with other drugs. So it is safer for our community if there are legal sources available. And of course, that says nothing about location, but that is one of the new pieces of information. At any rate, I voted for it before, and I will be again.
Thank you, Councillor Wainwright. I'll turn to Councillor O'Keefe.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So when I looked at this, there's a number of things I look at. You know, the views, whether they're from Sydney or not, the number of for and against, the comments and concerns raised, and deciding what weight to give to certain things. So in terms of explaining myself, I think that's a good thing to do, as Councillor Wainwright said, because there is very differing views on both sides. And I think it's important for the community to know that we heard the concerns and where our thinking is. So for me, one of the concerns I see raised was that in regards to tobacco and alcohol, and they're widely available in our community. Why are we treating them why are we treating cannabis differently? Because these things have a negative impact. And I guess my response to that is the reason we're treating them differently is because the provincial and federal governments have told us to, and they recognize that there's some negative health impacts, especially for youth. And so that's why they're asking us to provide our input at the local level. The fact that we know that tobacco and alcohol have negative impacts, especially on youth, is a reason that we should pay attention to when we're talking about introducing another substance to our community. Another comment people made was that they wanted to have access to medical cannabis for medical purposes. That seemed a pretty important thing, and they wanted something close by. And I just wanted to clarify for those people that they may not realize that, want to clarify again that this is not an outlet for medical cannabis. This is recreational cannabis. It's not the sort of place you can go with a prescription and get guidance on how to deal with your arthritis or your sleep issues. There is access to recreational cannabis in Sydney. The national pharmacy chain, individuals can go online, they can have a consultation with a doctor, they can get advice to determine what sort of cannabis product is best for them, and they can order that online and they can have that next day. So in terms of those who are wanting this for a location in Sydney, for those reasons, it is available. In terms of economic reasons, you know, people concerned about storefronts, bringing business to Sydney, that's certainly a consideration. However, what I place the most emphasis on is those concerns about the impact to youth. And so that's, Councillor Rintoul earlier mentioned the guidance from Island Health. And we got letters from several people highlighting that. And for me, that's really the most important thing of all of this. And that's where I put the greatest weight. And yes, it's something that the business community is wanting, but I have to put more focus and weight on what the health authority says. It's well documented that it has negative impacts on youth, and we should be mitigating access, exposure, and normalization. And so knowing that Beacon is a location of many family-focused events, our parades, our Sydney Market, Treat Street, that sort of thing, you know, that's why I'm not in favor of the motion. I put a great deal of emphasis and to what Island Health has to say. You know, we're in a pandemic and they've told us that we should wear masks. So if Island Health says wear a mask, I'm going to wear a mask. If they say that we shouldn't allow cigarette smoking and cannabis smoking in public places, you know, we accept that and we put signs up. And so if Island Health is telling us that we should not have cannabis, recreational cannabis retail in places where children frequent, then I'm going to take their advice. And so I'll leave it at that in terms of saying why I won't be supporting the motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor O'Keefe. I'll turn to Councillor Garnett, then Councillor Duncan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd just like to take the time to thank everyone who let us know their views. It's an important part of how we come to decision making, and it was great to see so many people offer their different opinions on the matter in helping us to make a decision. I have in the past have supported this application, and I will continue to do so. I look at the VHA report as well, and it stands out, and I think Councillor Rintoul mentioned it, alcohol, tobacco, and opioids continue to cause a greater overall burden of disease and injury than cannabis, and that's also in the VHA report. Just looking at the application itself, because that's basically what we're supposed to be doing, I look at the staff report, they've met every regulation that we've required of them. It's a legal product, it's a legitimate business, they have a great business plan. They've followed everything requested of us. If I had any concerns about the safety aspect, I look at our report, and the RCMP have had no concerns, and that to me holds a lot of weight, because I know a lot of people were concerned about particular safety issues in people, drug addicts, and things that might come into the community. And if our law enforcement officers don't have a concern with it, then I don't think I should, because I look to them for their guidance, and there's definitely no more than I do on these things. And that's an important one for me as well. As far as it being on Beacon and its location, and you know, I wrote down addresses for all the places in the vape store, tobacco, Beacon. They all have civic addresses on Beacon Avenue, so they're all Beacon. Some of them aren't right on it, but they are, for all intents and purposes, on Beacon Avenue. And if you want to talk about normalizing a product, you can buy wine and save on foods. This particular store, I believe children won't be able to go in. You have to be 19 or older. I could take my kids into a liquor store when they were younger. And same with all these other stores. They can't purchase anything, but they can be with you, which also normalizes the product. You know, you take a bottle of wine home, you go and you drink with your friends, that's normalizing alcohol. And children or youth are seeing that daily, and they see it all the time. It's a challenging issue, and I understand people's concerns around it. I understand the perspective of the detrimental effects to the youth in our community, but I also know that this is an extremely regulated product who has lots of stringent guidelines, and I believe that these owners will do their best to make sure that they are making that the product is not going to get into the hands it's not supposed to have it. I just feel like they've done everything, and now when I see the sign in their store window saying they're willing to even change their name, I mean, they've been extremely flexible. The fact that staff has no concerns and they've met all these regulations, to me, to deny this application does not pass what I like to refer to as a logic litmus test, and that's all I have to say. I will be approving it or voting in favor of it. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Garnett, and I'll now turn to Councillor Duncan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've been in favor of this application for all of the votes we've had on it, and I remain so in favor. But I guess I was moved to expand on my remarks tonight by the comments of Ian Foss, who spoke earlier, specifically mentioned that his son got off opioids by using cannabis products. And this kind of keeps coming up. The misunderstandings about what cannabis is used for and the role it plays in drug addiction in our society, especially with regards to youth. In every case, the people I know who have fallen to harder drugs, and in some cases never got back up again, every last one of them went through the door of alcohol first. Every last one. And most of them did do cannabis products because, as many of our speakers noted tonight, it is a very good painkiller, unlike alcohol. And that's what people use it for. And if so, we are normalizing the use of cannabis to the youth in our society for the use of legally dealing with pain instead of using alcohol. I will definitely co-sign that. And far be it for me, if we're going to try and judge people for their drug vices, to judge, because I currently have alcohol brewing in my basement, the legal amount that you're allowed to home brew, which you're allowed to do at home where my children live. And I should note that cannabis is also legal to grow at home, up to 4 plants for personal use. So that if there are children in our community who are going to be exposed in an unregulated environment where nobody checked their ID first to marijuana, it will be because they got it the same way all the kids have gotten it up to now, and that's probably from pilfering it from their parents' supply or from getting it from Joe down the street on the black market. I have no concern about legal access to a regulated supply of marijuana and the effects on the health and the children in our community. In fact, quite the opposite. So thank you, Ian, for sharing your story, and I'm very glad that your son was able to help himself in that way. And thank you, Council, for hearing my remarks.
Thank you, Councillor Duncan. I'd like to begin my comments by first thanking everyone who submitted their views. The council, of course, is elected by the residents of Sydney to make decisions in their best interests and the best interests of the community at large. There were a lot of people who did not indicate in their submissions whether they are residents or their interest in Sydney. I appreciate that non-residents may have an interest in Sydney, and I want to thank those who identified themselves as residents, local businesses, and non-residents in their interest in Sydney. The matter of whether to recommend or not recommend this retail cannabis application was not posed as a referendum to residents. For me, it's not simply about how many people wrote in saying yes or no. While saying yes or no is a view, council must consider reasons for or against, and there is an expectation we will state the reasons for our individual votes. So thank you to those who specified their reasons for or against this cannabis retail application. I did want to mention at the outset when introducing this item that we did have 351 written submissions to council. It is evident from the submissions and from the listening I've done in our community that there are people firmly on both sides. And I know that whichever way that I vote on this decision, there will be residents who have lived in the community for some time and who I've found to be reasonable and caring about our community, and that they will disagree with my decision either way, and likewise with either decision from our council. I'd like to quickly summarize the reasons given by those opposed. A retail cannabis store will attract undesirable behaviors from people who use cannabis, including panhandling, crime, including theft. Such undesirable behaviors will make people feel unsafe, thus affecting the quality of life for residents. It will lead people to avoid shopping in the immediate area, causing a loss of sale to businesses. It will lessen the overall charm of our downtown, have a negative impact on the image of Sydney. By having a retail cannabis shop in a busy location on Beacon Avenue, it normalizes cannabis use, and it will lead to an increase in the use of cannabis in adults and youth. Council shouldn't approve it because of the known negative health effects. And it will lead to more cannabis use in downtown, increasing what most find to be an undesirable smell. I can understand why some residents of our community have these views. In Canada, cannabis became a banned substance in the early 1920s. In 2017, there were just under 48,000 police-reported cannabis offenses. If convicted, you had a criminal record. For some 95 years, a lot of negatives were associated with cannabis and it being illegal. However, just under 2 years ago, almost 2 years ago, it was legalized. And I turned to the Government of Canada website on cannabis legalization and regulation, and it states the Cannabis Act creates a strict legal framework. The Act aims to accomplish 3 goals: keep cannabis out of the hands of youth, protect public health and safety by allowing adults access to legal cannabis, and keep profits out of the pockets of criminals. So here we have some in our community who are opposed to cannabis for the undesirable associations that have been attached to cannabis for nearly a century. Yet we have the federal government, having legalized cannabis, is actually trying to improve the health and well-being and keep cannabis out of the hands of youth. In the same website, it says, no persons may sell or provide cannabis to any person under the age of 18. There are 2 criminal offenses related to providing cannabis to youth with maximum penalties of 14 years in jail, which includes giving or selling cannabis to youth. The production and retail sales and consumption of cannabis, as we've heard tonight, is legal in Canada, and it is strictly regulated at the federal and the provincial level. And we've heard that a retail license applicant must first go through a rigorous approval process with the provincial LCRB, and the applicant meets those stringent regulations. We have 3 retail stores on Beacon Avenue that sell liquor and 1 store that sells tobacco. And I have a difficult time making a distinction between the sale of liquor, tobacco, and cannabis, appreciating that all 3 products can have negative health impacts on members of our community. There are many people in our community that have a variety of health conditions that are managed better by the use of different recreational cannabis products. And we've heard from several of those individuals this evening, and we've heard from many of those individuals in their personal stories in written submissions. Cannabis is used by a broad demographic in our society. I want to note that Greater Victoria has a population of nearly 400,000 now, and we're separated into 13 municipalities making these same decisions that we're making this evening. In Central Saanich, they approved their first retail cannabis location in May of 2019. They approved their second retail cannabis location in November of 2019, and it is in a retail area in Brentwood Bay, just off West Saanich Road and Verdier Road beside other retailers. Saanich has recently approved its first retail license application in Uptown Mall, one of the busiest business districts on Vancouver Island. Oak Bay approved a location on Cowborough Bay Road in a small retail strip mall across the street from another retail strip mall in a residential neighborhood. Victoria has many locations, but of note to me is the cannabis store in Fairfield Plaza beside a bank and among 20 other retail businesses, including grocery, pharmacy, and many of the businesses we see on our main street. Esquimalt has a location in a retail area, and there are others in the West Shore. So I appreciate the concerns expressed by those opposed this evening. However, the evidence to date in these other communities is that the negative consequences that we thought might occur with the sale of retail cannabis are not occurring. We have received, it was a requirement for us to refer this application to our RCMP detachment commander, and he reported back that they had no concerns with regards to increased activity that they would be required to do. So I ask, and I visited a couple of these locations elsewhere in the community, and it has become a part of the retail fabric. This evening we heard the term, and I was going to use it myself, in terms of destigmatization. That 95-year history of illegal cannabis and the tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands that were charged offenses and received a criminal record did stigmatize cannabis. But the federal government 2 years ago has made it legal and has highly regulated it. So I believe that this will be a significant change for our community. I believe the submission from local businesses that support cannabis minimize the impacts likely to be seen in the downtown. And I believe it will be seen to be another regular business in our store over time. I think 5-10 years down the road, and I think of other communities, whether it's in Western Europe or other jurisdictions, and I think we will come to accept it. And I trust that the senior levels of government will continue to protect the public health and safety of our communities. And I will be voting in support of the application. So we've heard from all council members this evening, and we have the motion on the floor. Do we have any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? We have one opposed, Councillor O'Keefe. The motion carries. Thank you, and thank you again to everyone who submitted submissions in writing, and thank you to those who spoke before council this evening. I'd now like to turn to item 5B on our agenda, which is development variance permit application number DV 100297, 9805 Seaport Place, the Sydney Pier Hotel and Spa, and the request to allow a new canopy sign and fascia sign. This was discussed with a staff report at a previous council meeting, and council did direct for notice to go out to nearby residents, and we have received 11 submissions as of today, and we do have a recommendation.
I will move the application approved.
Second.
Discussion? Councillor Rintoul.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Can I just clarify through to staff, there was some suggestion that receipt of notice was somewhat delayed, and perhaps if there's any insight from staff with respect to that, I'd appreciate it. Thank you.
I can speak to it. Notice went out on September 17th. It was mailed out. It was mailed out as per our usual procedures. We're not sure of the delay. It could have been through post delivery. Could have been a delay through the interruption due to smoke. We're not sure, but we did follow our normal procedures. Thank you.
Thank you. Did you wish to continue, Councillor?
No, thank you.
Thank you. Further comment? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? We have none opposed. The motion carries. Thank you. I'll next turn to number 6, which is adoption of minutes. We have 2 sets of minutes, those from our regular council meeting of September 14th and those from our special council meeting of September 17th.
I move that both sets of minutes be adopted.
Second.
Any errors or omissions? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? None opposed. The motion carries. Thank you. And I'll next turn to 7A, which is a request for a letter of support regarding the Blue Heron Park Turf grant proposal. And we have an email from the Peninsula Soccer Association dated September 4th. This item was postponed from a previous council meeting until this evening, based on us believing we would receive additional information. We have received additional information, and today, as a late item, we had another staff report from staff with another consideration as well. I would ask council to consider the 2 recommendations separately, and after making the recommendation with regards to providing a letter of support, council members should feel welcome to ask any question with regards to this item.
So thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm prepared to move the motion that the Town of Sydney provide a letter of support contingent on the Memorial Park Society support of the project.
Second.
Councillor Rintoul.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm comfortable with the assumption that the Memorial Park Society does indeed support this undertaking. I understand from the executive director, Mr. Brad Edgett, that the MPS executive have had this discussion and are supportive of the application. Their full board meets tomorrow. I'm a liaison to the Memorial Park Society on behalf of the town, and it is anticipated that the board will provide that support at the meeting tomorrow formally, at which time I would share that update with the Chief Administrative Officer. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Rintoul. I'll turn to Councillor O'Keefe.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So thank you for Councillor Rintoul. I also had the question about whether MPS was on board with this, so that's good to know. But I'm wondering whether the Soccer Association is, or whether MPS is considering making a financial investment in this themselves. This is their property, and presumably they have an interest in improving the property as well for the benefit of the community. I know that they get a fair chunk of money from the town now for the annual fee for the parking lot. So I'm wondering whether a request is being put towards MPS to financially support this as well.
Thank you, Councillor. I'll turn to Councillor Rintoul if he chooses to reply.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. With respect to that item, it has not come before Memorial Park Society board discussions to look to be a financial participant, and I suggest that support financially would be unlikely, in that the terms of a long-term lease and the useful life of a facility, turf field of this nature, the turf would likely expire in advance of the long-term lease. And so I don't know that there is a residual value for a turf field. There might actually be some potential liability that I suppose would also be addressed in that lease and contract. I'd also note that with respect to the revenue the parking lot is generating for the Memorial Park Society and hence the Winspear Centre, that it's likely become very much a lifeline in the current environment. Thank you.
Thank you. Did you wish to continue, Councillor O'Keefe?
Yeah, I guess just the comment that I would make is that the Memorial Park Society, they get a good chunk of money from the town. As I said before, most of that gets put into Mary Winspear Centre, which is fair enough. But I think it's reasonable to ask the question, you know, for them to consider spreading that around to their other community assets. So I would ask Councillor Rintoul to at least perhaps post that question at their meeting tomorrow. Thank you. That's all.
And then I'd like to comment.
Certainly. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, Councillor Keith, I'd be happy to raise the subject during the meeting tomorrow. I would just comment that, of course, this application going through the District of North Saanich, because that facility is in North Saanich, and that I don't think it's unusual that Sydney would be content to see our funding support under the current regime going to the Mary Winspear Centre located in Sydney. But I'm more than happy, without bias, to raise the comments that you've made this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. And if I may comment for a moment, I certainly appreciate the question from Councillor O'Keefe, and you have noted that the Mary Winspear Centre Memorial Park Society does receive significant municipal funding from both Sydney and North Saanich, to the tune of several hundreds of thousands of dollars. And it's important for the sustainability of our community centre. It is the heart of our community, and which is part of their mission. And given the sums of money, we will be seeing in the next report that the total budget for this project is $1.8 million, and that has risen given a contingency that will be added. That to expect the Mary Winspear Centre to take a significant sum of revenue from the revenues that are either provided by the town or from their other general revenues to put towards this project would actually be a challenge for the organization. However, I appreciate Councillor Rintoul has stated that he will certainly raise it at the board meeting without bias. Do we have further speakers? Councillor Duncan.
Hi. I'm not sure. I'm still not really sure how I feel about this. It's simply because the issue I had brought up with the idea of an artificial turf field before was that it's artificial turf and it was plastics. And last time we saw the report about it, I believe Councillor Garnett spoke about it as well. I feel like our town is spending quite a large amount of money on already the remediation of one site that was degraded because there didn't have any data on environmental effects at the time. And we've, asked our staff and North Saanich and others to start looking into the Salem Harbor. And I still really have misgivings about the idea of putting an artificial turf, which may shed microplastics into the environment, and it has not necessarily been well investigated yet, right upstream of fish critical habitat that we're trying to restore. So on the one hand, I want to be in favor of upgrades to this field that will make it more usable for the sports users in this area. On the other, I'm not comfortable that the information we have been given in any way addresses those gaps. And I'm worried about how far we're going to go down this route and end up with another liability in our hands that 20 years later we'd raised some questions about. So I'm not sure if anyone else has heard other discussions about this so far, but yeah, I maybe could be in favor of at least of a letter of support in that much, but I really would need to see more investigation before I could really put a wholehearted support behind this. Thanks.
Thank you. I'll turn to Councillor Wainwright, then Councillor O'Keefe.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I'm actually going to echo Councillor Duncan's comments. I also have some concern about the environmental aspects of artificial turf breaking down over time and the fate of the plastic fibers and the microplastics. And they are seeing negative effects from artificial turf breaking down at other locations, and particularly plastics getting into aquatic systems. I'm open to considering this, but I haven't seen any environmental screening at all of the project, and that is that's challenging, particularly if we're looking at making a commitment of a little over $100,000 towards it. So that's like 1% of Sydney property taxes towards this. Long-term liabilities, I guess I'm not that. I imagine we can protect ourselves from that because it's not in Sydney. And I'm sure we can write the agreement in a manner that gives us complete arm's length. But notwithstanding that, I still would like to see the environmental screening before it's an unconditional willing to put up the money.
Thank you, Councillor. I'll turn to Councillor O'Keefe. And then Councillor Fallon.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I know that there has been an issue with artificial turf fields for the last several years, and for the reasons that Councillor Duncan and Wainwright have mentioned with microplastics shedding. However, my understanding is there's been considerable evolution on the materials that they're using now for these turf fields. And I know that this was something that was a concern when Victoria was talking about doing turf as well. And so in their reports, they mentioned using of biodegradable materials. I also note in the submission from Peninsula Soccer that they're talking about using biodegradable infill derived from coconut husks and other biodegradable fill. And it looks like there's plans in place for storm drain infrastructure to mitigate the spread of microbeads or other things into the water. So it looks to me like there will be some measures taken to protect the environment. I'd like to see more, but I'm happy to support it for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor O'Keefe. I'll turn to Councillor Fallon.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, and thank you to my colleagues for the points that they've raised in this. When this first came across our table a few months back, I did speak about the environmental aspect of it, and I still will speak to that part of it. I understand wanting to open up the field and getting longer access to it throughout the year. The economic boost, I understand all of those arguments in favor of doing it. I think while I see merit in that request, I would like to see some greater information, some increased information on how this is going to impact the environment. There's the offset between you don't have the lawnmowers, you don't have the fertilization. I understand all of that part of it. It's the product itself that I have some questions about and would like to see some more information on. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I also want to thank councillors for raising the points they have. I will note that the provincial government has approved earlier this year a replacement turf field in a grant application. Did approve a replacement turf field in Saanich, and has approved other turf fields on Vancouver Island. I can't speak to the rest of the province. I would hope that there is an environmental lens by the province as adjudicators, although I have to confess I am not aware of the environmental aspects, whether studies have been done or whether the province does apply such a lens to the application. But I do support this application. It's a situation where the Peninsula Soccer Association is one of several associations in the region. It is the only one without a turf field, and it has currently has over 600, nearly 700 children as members from the 3 peninsula municipalities, and the players are becoming more accustomed to playing on turf fields, and there's an expectation, or sorry, an appreciation that's where they prefer to play, which may have an impact on the Peninsula Soccer Association in the longer term. But I do appreciate those points, but I will provide, I am willing to support a letter of support. Seeing no further speakers, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? We have none opposed. The motion carries. Before going to the second staff recommendation, I'll turn to Mr. Humble to give a background of how this information arose most recently. Mr. Humble.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So the second aspect of item 7A is a request that came in late last week from the District of North Saanich for funding assistance for the turf field project, should they be successful in attaining the grant. Given the fact that this is a significant sub-regional project and the town's indication of financial support would in fact increase the chances of their grant application being successful, staff are in support of this request. The recommendation in the staff report is for a commitment of 1/3 of the municipal contribution, a portion of the project, which would equate to approximately $107,500. The overall financials are attached to a District of North Saanich report that is before their council this evening, and at the top of page 3 you can see the financials. The balance that is to be provided as a municipal contribution is $322,500. It's indicated in the report that they are indicating that they may come to the town of Sydney as well as the District of Central Saanich to seek a funding contribution. So upon review of the report last week by staff, we noticed the indication that they may come forward, and thus we brought it forward to council for consideration. It's also worth noting that in all likelihood, if North Saanich were to be unsuccessful with respect to the grant application, we very well may see the Soccer Association coming forward to the 3 municipalities for a much more significant funding request. So again, from a staff perspective, we feel that supporting the North Saanich grant application and putting their best foot forward is a positive approach, and we are making the recommendation to council for consideration of 1/3 funding. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Humble, and we do have a recommendation.
Excuse me. I will move the recommendation that council provide a funding commitment of up to $107,500, 1/3 of the municipal cost, for the Blue Heron Park Artificial Turf Fields project, conditional on a grant application being successful.
Do we have a seconder?
I'll second.
Councillor O'Keefe seconded. Open it for discussion. I'll turn to Councillor Rintoul as the mover, and then to Councillor Garnett.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I certainly recognize that this is a significant amount of money that we're being asked to give consideration to, which obviously will impact our budget considerations. And I recognize that in the current environment, the timing of those fundings may not be ideal. But I also recognize that should they be successful in receiving 65% of the required funding in the form of a grant, that this is an opportunity that benefits the peninsula as a whole. And it's another cooperative project that we would see between the 3 municipalities. And again, the assumption being that all 3 municipalities would have to contribute in order to see the project move forward with municipal funding, as is suggested in the report. I'll also note that I think it's important that Peninsula Soccer themselves are contributors, and as I recollect from the report, I'm just looking for it, that they are agreeing themselves from their field improvement fund to contribute $325,000. And so as such, I see this as really a great 5-way partnership between the grant, Peninsula Soccer, and the 3 municipalities that I'm pleased to support, again, on contingency that the grant is approved. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. I'll turn to Councillor Garnett.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I do see merit in this project, and I do agree with much of it, what Councillor Rintoul has said. I do have somewhat of a hesitation on it, though, and it's simply around the amount of money, and it's unfortunate the timing of this. But we don't know how our financial situation is going to be come year end. It technically is not in our municipality, and I'm just worried that we may need to be able to put that money to far greater use in our own community. There may be things that come up that we may need that money for, and I want to put our community first versus their community. But I mean, we're in a pandemic, and the financial situation is not known as at this time, and we have to be considerate of what things come up in our community that might be priority needs. And I would certainly like to have that $107,000 available if something should arise. And another side of this argument or point of view is you go ahead, they get the grant, they build the soccer, they may not be able to use it because of COVID. So it just sits there because regulations, we may be in a second surge, we not be able to play soccer. So then it's a field covered with artificial turf doing nothing. And then again, the environmental aspects on top of it. So if this was a different time, I might think differently, but given what we're in and given the unknowns, I can't support the motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Garnett. I'll turn to Councillor Fallett. Thank you,
Mr. Mayor. I see incredible merit for the field. I don't dispute the benefits whatsoever. Councillor Garnett raised some good points regarding the cost, the tax dollars, and priorities, and the timing of where we are. For me, there is the unknown of the actual product that is being used on the field, and I am concerned long-term environmental issues, we're going through Ray Creek remediation right now, and that sort of just highlights the importance of what we're doing. And I need to be certain that this product is not going to, the benefits of having a year-round field are not going to be set off by the environmental impact of using artificial turf. So, and it is a big chunk of money at this point. I'm not going to support the ask. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Councillor Fallot. I'll turn to Councillor Wainwright and then speak myself.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I also have trouble with the motion as it's currently worded, and in fact, I guess would propose an amendment that could address the environmental aspects of it. First comment I'm going to make, I do appreciate the concern about making a commitment of a little over $100,000 at this time, and without the full context of the rest of our budget. But in my experience, if we need to, I'm sure we can find that money from somewhere within our system. It may be deferring a capital project, it may be borrowing from reserves, but I'm confident we're not going to find ourselves short because we've made this commitment. And in particular, my experience with our CFO, Mr. Hissack, is that if he had any concern at all about our ability to, or our potential need for that money for some other purpose, it would have been stated pretty clearly in the staff report. So I'm okay with making the commitment conditional on the grant application being approved, but I would like to propose the following amendment. And so I move that we add to the end of it, and a favorable environmental screening by a qualified environmental professional. So it would be conditional on a grant application being successful and a favorable environmental screening by a qualified environmental professional.
I can second that.
Okay, so we have an amendment on the floor. Would you like to motivate further, Councillor Wainwright? You have spoken to it.
I think it's fairly clear, so I'll pass.
Thank you, Councillor Fallot.
No, I'm good with what Councillor Wainwright presented and my previous comments. Thank you.
Okay, I'll turn to other speakers on the amendment. I have Councillor Rintoul.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. And while I'm very comfortable with the sentiment, I wonder what that does to the cost implications of the overall project. And I think I'll yield to support the amended motion on the basis that there's a fairly significant contingency built into the overall project cost at 25%. I don't have all the other detail around the intent with respect to pre-construction, but I think it's probably reasonable on the assumption that it's not cost prohibitive. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Do we have any of the speakers on the amendment? Councillor Wainwright?
Sorry, Mr. Mayor. I'm just realizing that since approval of the grant, it would require federal funding, like funding from the other sources. They're probably going to want to see that environmental screening anyway as a condition of support of the grant. But I still would like to leave the amendment. I'm just not as concerned about what that environmental screening might cost.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor. I'll turn to Councillor O'Keefe.
Thank you. Just on the environmental aspect, I recall when that field was first built as a grass field, because there was considerable disruption in that area, that we did have to do a consultation with I can't say for sure it was an environmental consultant. I just remember that Peninsula Streams was involved, providing guidance, and other authorities getting involved as well, because we did have provincial money for that. So my recollection is there was some focus on that even when we were building the grass field.
Thank you, Councillor. Seeing no other speakers on the amendment, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? We have one opposed, so the motion carries. We're back to the main motion, and does anyone wish to speak? Councillor O'Keefe, and then I would like to speak next.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I fully support this motion for a number of reasons. First of all, in terms of community, health in our community, which is one of our strategic priorities. So having a turf field allows kids and adults more opportunities to get outside and be playing soccer in the rain. So I think we should support that. In terms of concern about COVID and, if we get a second wave, that people aren't going to be able to use it anyways. Well, I mean, COVID is not going to be with us forever. It will, yes, be around for a short time. But I know that the soccer associations have got measures in place now in order to mitigate risk. So kids are outside playing soccer, and of the different sort of sports that are out there, soccer is probably one of the least risky in terms of the kids are outside, they don't have to be inside. So the whole COVID thing is not too much of an issue for me. The other thing is in terms of economic development. So this is something that will attract more people, more business to our community. There's a potential for tournaments, having a field like this that would have significant spin-offs to Sydney. It'll also generate jobs, which is important in a time like this. And the other thing is, when I talk to businesses about, what can the town do to help your business thrive? And one of the things they talk about is make your community a great place to live, and have lots of amenities that will be attractive to families and children. And, yes, it is not, Blue Heron Park is technically not part of in Sydney's boundaries, but I would say that it is part of our community. And I believe if you look at the numbers of participants, kids who are participating in sports at Peninsula Soccer, that you'll find a large percentage of them come from Sydney. So there is significant benefits in terms of health and well-being and economic development. And I think we should support it in terms of, yes, it's a big amount of money, but you know what, as it was mentioned, if our CFO did not have any significant concerns, I don't. And I think it's a good investment in the overall community. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor O'Keefe. And I won't repeat, but I do support the promotion of healthy activity in our community. Again, it has been touched on that I think it's important, and it's important in the provincial government's eyes, the people who will be adjudicating on these grants, that municipalities are seen to cooperate on initiatives, particularly infrastructure initiatives like this. I'll note that the Peninsula Soccer Association has applied previously twice for grants as a nonprofit society, which they're entitled to do, and that those grants were unsuccessful. And I want to thank Mayor Jeff Orr and his council, and for North Saanich staff for showing municipal leadership to submit this grant application. This application intake only was opened a number of weeks ago, and the submission date is October the 1st. There was new information that came to us on Friday. Council will note that in the previous report that we postponed until this evening, it showed that there would be a total municipal contribution required of $163,000, and at that time North Saanich was willing to wait and see the results of success of a grant application, and then pursue a possible joint funding from the 2 or 3 municipalities. However, given clarification on the amount that the province will contribute, which has gone from 73% to 65%, and the need in the application to show proper contingency, which Councillor Rantoul has noted is 25%. That has increased it such that the municipal contribution now would be, as Mr. Humble indicated, 322,500. And so there is an aspect that important to consider, that the province will, I believe, look more favorably on this application, shown that there is a collaborative municipal partner in funding. And I would like to further note that there are, looking straight at the report, 655 youth players last year and 121 adult players. It is one of the largest sports activities on the peninsula, and I think it will take municipal leadership to move this project forward for the future of for our youth and adults that are participating. I would like to make one last note with regards to when our financial commitment would actually be made. And if I could have a clarification from staff, in terms of discussions that I'm aware of between staff and the Peninsula Soccer Association, it's understood that this grant application will not be replied to until the spring of next year, and hence it's understood amongst the municipalities and Peninsula Soccer Association that this would be a 2022 project, and hence it would fall in the 2022 budget. I'll turn to Mr. Hissick.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Our understanding is that the grant award would not be made until late summer of 2021, so it could be up to 11 months from now, which would put this into late 21 or early 22 for actual construction. So I would, if approved, I would include this amount in the 2021 capital budget, funded from one of our reserves. But it's possible that the money wouldn't change hands until 2022.
Okay. Thank you for that clarification, Mr. Hissick. Are there any further speakers? Seeing none, I'll call the question on the amended motion. All those in favor? Opposed? We have one opposed. The motion carries. Thank you to staff for those reports, and thank you for council for the deliberation. Okay, I just got to get on the right page here. Okay, so next we'll turn to the Mayor's report. I just have one item this evening. Last week was the Union of BC Municipalities annual convention. It was a virtual convention for the very first time by a provincial ministerial order. The UBCM was, which serves 189 local governments in the province, was able to hold a virtual annual general meeting and was able to hold a virtual conference. There were over 1,000 delegates who participated, and I was pleased to have Councillor Duncan join me virtually in the in aspects. It ran for 3 days. There was also the Association of Vancouver Island and Coastal Communities Association annual general meeting, which is normally held in the spring, but again, because of COVID, they had permission to hold their AGM, and a new executive was president and executive was elected. As a councillor may be aware, it is a normal process. There are 5, apart from the UBCM, which operates across the province, there are 5 regional associations. AVICC, I mentioned, is some 50 local governments on Vancouver Island and the Sunshine Coast. And the normal process is that councils in their association can make recommendations, motions to the regional association, and if they pass, they go to the UBCM. This year, without that opportunity of the regional association, motions went directly to UBCM. There were 200, exactly 200 resolutions before the membership, and most of those resolutions were attended to during the conference. And I have to say that UBCM was able to put very high quality panels together on a number of aspects of the COVID pandemic, particularly in response, recovery, and resilience in terms of building back better, but actually looking well beyond the possible impacts in our communities when we finally achieve a new normal. And Souk Mayor Maya Tate was president last year, and she'll now sit as past president, and a new executive was elected. So I found it beneficial to meet with colleagues, even though it was a virtual format, and have excellent presentations and consider the motions that were put before UBCM. UBCM now takes those motions and, in conjunction with existing UBCM policy, advocates on behalf of the 189 local governments to the provincial and federal governments, also through FCM, which was in attendance at the conference as well. That wraps up my mayor's report. I'll turn to councillor's report, and we have Councillor Garnett with an update from the Sydney Museum and Archives.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I attended the latest Sydney Museum and Archives Society meeting on September 12th as liaison, and I just want to inform council and the public that Miss Alyssa Gerwing has now assumed her role as executive director. It was effective actually on the 12th. I would like to take the time to thank Mr. Peter Garnham for his 20 years of dedication to that role at the museum. Did an excellent job in bringing the museum up to a high quality of standard. Also let council know that Sydney Furman has been hired as the assistant archivist and will start today. Actually was the date she was supposed to start. She was a summer student in the past, so it's she'll have familiarity with the facility, so that should be a nice transition. And council might remember that this was part of a budget item that both us and North Saanich committed to in helping find the search and for the succession which is taking place. Visitors to the museum, as one might imagine, are down, although the museum continues to be in a sound financial position. The position has been helped by 2 successful grant applications. The first is from the Federal Museum's Assistance Program for traveling exhibits and covers the cost of the Snapshots of Canada exhibit currently at the museum for a total of up to $9,800. The second is from Canadian Heritage and is Phase 2 COVID-19 relief funding, which the museum qualify for in the amount of $17,000 for specified COVID-19 related expenses. So just a thanks to Alyssa and the great job she does at applying for grants, and it's made a real difference in their financial situation, especially given the conditions we're now in. And finally, the Peninsula News Review 2020 Reader's Choice Awards. The City Museum was voted second in both favorite indoor public event and favorite kid-friendly establishment, and tied for third in the favorite Peninsula tourist attraction. And that's my update. Thank you.
Thank you for that very positive update, Councillor Garnett. We'll now turn to committee reports, and I'll first turn to either Councillor Wainwright or Councillor Duncan, who are liaisons to the Beacon Wharf Select Committee.
I beg your pardon, Mr. We'd added an amended agenda item 11B from the Economic Advisory Committee that I was reporting on.
Sorry, we were going to do that under item 17, notice of motion.
Okay.
Councillor Toon.
I beg your pardon.
Okay. Yep.
That's fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for clarifying that. And so
I'll move receipt of the minutes of the Beacon Wharf Select Committee of August 18th.
It's moved and seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? None opposed. The motion carries. Thank you. And I'll now turn to Councillor Wainwright, who is chair of our Committee of the Whole meeting on September 21st with regards to the minutes and recommendations.
I'll move receipt of the minutes of Committee of the Whole.
Second.
Any discussion? I'll call a question. All in favor? None opposed. Motion carries.
Okay, there were 2 recommendations coming out of Committee of the Whole. The first one, and I so move, is with respect to the Sydney Childcare Inventory and Action Plan final report. And the motion is 1, that the 2020 Sydney Childcare Inventory and Action Plan prepared by Queenswood Consulting Group be received. 2, that the recommended actions and implementation plan outlined in the staff report titled Sydney Childcare Inventory and Action Plan Final Report, dated September 15th, 2020, be adopted. And 3, that staff report back to Council following the adoption of a new official community plan to provide an update on the implementation plan for the 2020 Sydney Childcare Action Plan.
Thank you, Councillor. Do we have a seconder?
Second.
Discussion? I'll call a question. All in favor? Opposed? None opposed. The motion carries. Thank you.
Okay, and the final recommendation is with respect to the annual report from the Sydney Event Advisory Group, and I so move that the 2019 annual report and the 2020 update from the Sydney Event Advisory Group be received for information.
Second.
Discussion? I would only comment that I thought it was an outstanding report and shows how 15 local community organizations have been working together for a number of years to make a very vibrant Sydney, and we look forward to them continuing to work together as we recover from the current pandemic. I'll call the question. All in favor? None opposed. The motion carries. We'll now turn to staff reports, and we have a number of, we have the extension of the temporary expanded service area authorizations, also known as TESSA authorizations for the Mary Winspear Center, and I'll turn to Mr. Newcomb to introduce.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So this program was put in place by the Liquor and Cannabis Regulation Branch in approximately May, and the intent was to allow establishments with liquor licenses to achieve physical distancing guidelines within their establishments. And what it does is essentially expand the licensed area within the establishment to allow people to basically spread out more. Council considered this back in June. The LCRB essentially provides local governments with the option to do a blanket approval of all TESSA eligible establishments in the local government's jurisdiction, or to do it on a case-by-case basis. As Council recalls, the decision was to go with the latter, the case-by-case basis approach. Subsequent to that, the Mary Winspear Center came forward with a request which Council subsequently approved. That is eligible until October 31st, 2020 of this year. They're now requesting, and the LCRB has put in place a program to extend that until October 31st of 2021. If Council recalls, the extra licensed area that was approved for the Mary Winspear Center was the area immediately outside the Charlie White Theatre, and also immediately outside Meeting Room 2, where the OCP meeting was held last weekend. So those two areas would continue to be licensed for another year from October 31st.
Thank you, Mr. Newcomb, and we do have a recommendation.
Move the recommendation that staff be directed to advise the Liquor and Cannabis Regulation Branch that the town of Sydney supports the extension of the Mary Winspear Center's temporary expanded service area authorization until October 31st, 2021.
Second.
Thank you, councillors. Any discussion? I just want to thank the province for this one-year extension, given the current situation of the pandemic. And just a question of clarification through to staff. While we do have an applicant that previously applied and this extension will apply, if there was a new establishment with a liquor license that wished to apply in the next year, they would be open to do so under this extension?
Correct, yes. Any establishment with a liquor primary license needs to come to the town. A food primary license can do it automatically through the LCRB.
Great. Thank you for that clarification. I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? We have none opposed. The motion carries. Next, turn to item 13B, which is waiver of frontage requirement for 9376 Lochside Drive. It's a subdivision application number SA 100208, and I'll turn to Ms. Verhagen to introduce.
Through the Mayor to Council, this application is for a 4-lot subdivision of the property at 9376 Lochside Drive. The portion of the application that comes to Council in this case is a request to relax the provincial requirement for 10% of the perimeter of each proposed lot to front onto a street. That legislation comes from the Local Government Act, and in this case the property owner is requesting to waive that requirement for the proposed lots 1 and 2, each of which would front onto the Frost Avenue frontage of this property. Lots 3 and 4 that are proposed to front onto Lochside Drive meet the 10% requirement. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have a question through? Yep, go ahead, Councillor Gunn.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I when I'm looking at the diagrams, I'm just wondering about 2273 Frost. Have they raised any concerns? Are they aware of it? I'm just looking in terms of where the driveways would come off. It kind of goes into where their driveway is as well, and I'm wondering about with the narrowness of the driveway of the one closest to them, if that's going to cause any issues.
Through the Mayor to Councillor Garnett, the civil plan that would be submitted as part of the subdivision application would look at the driveway alignments on that Frost Avenue axis there. The frontage of that section, the property's frontage onto Frost Avenue there is 15 meters wide. And then the other property at 2273 Frost does have quite a wide access onto that little portion of Frost that bumps out. So it should be achievable without any conflict, but the civil plan prepared by the applicant's engineer would look at that more closely.
Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any further questions? If Councillor Fallot.
Sorry, thank you. Just a question through you to staff, if I may, Mr. Mayor. On the west side of the property, it shows a statutory right-of-way. Is that for the town servicing those properties back in there, or what is that right-of-way for?
Through the mayor to Councillor Fallot, that's a stormwater right-of-way, and it provides stormwater connections to properties beyond this one, and that would be maintained and kept clear through the development of this property. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Verhagen. So we do have a recommendation.
I'll move the recommendation that section 4.1 of subdivision and development bylaw number 1390, that no parcel of land has less than 10% of its perimeter fronting on a street, be waived for proposed lots 1 and 2 at 9376 Lochside Drive.
Second.
Just any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? Opposed, none opposed, the motion carries. We'll turn to item 13C, which is the Patricia Storm and Sewer Trenchless Replacement Contract Award number 2020-013. And we have a report from staff, and I'll turn to Ms. Clary to introduce, please.
Thank you, Mayor. So this is a project that it's in our capital plan to do this year. We had a design consultant do the design, and it was a bit behind schedule, so we weren't sure if it was going to be constructed this year, but we put it out to tender, and we received 2 bids back, and the consultant has reviewed the bids and is recommending to go with the low bid. The actual project is to replace a storm and sanitary sewer lines, 2 of them in easements between Patricia Place and McDonald Park Road, and then Patricia Place and Rest Haven. So the storm sewer will be upsized because it is at capacity during a 10-year storm event, and the sewer will be replaced because of its age.
Thank you. Are there any questions, Ms. Staff? Thank you, Ms. Clary. We do have a recommendation.
Move the recommendation that contract 2020-013 for the Patricia Storm and Sanitary Trenchless Replacement Project be awarded to the low bidder Milestone Equipment Contracting Limited.
Second.
Any discussion? I'll only comment that it's great to see that it comes significantly under budget. And with that, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed, none opposed. The motion carries. Thank you. Next, we have item 13D, which is the Wounded Warriors Canada and the Sydney Fire Department Partnership Agreement, and a report, and I'll ask Chief Mickelson to introduce, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor and Council. The Sydney Volunteer Fire Department currently has a direct referral program for members requiring support after exposure to incidents resulting in mental health trauma. The service is available 24/7 and is targeted at the responder or responders who witness or participated in a traumatic event. Wounded Warriors Canada also provides this a similar evidence-based care for first responders, but expands the service and is more tailored toward dealing with the affected family members. They accomplish this through trauma resiliency programs, couples overcoming PTSD programs, PTSD service dog programs, spousal resiliency programs, and also Wounded Warriors Kids Camp, which deals with the secondary trauma of a child whose parent has been diagnosed with an occupational stress injury like PTSD. And really the goal of this affiliation is just to add another layer to our existing mental health resiliency program.
Thank you. Are there any questions? We do have a recommendation.
I'll move the recommendation that the agreement with Wounded Warriors Canada for the purpose of enhancing the fire department's provision of mental health services to its response personnel be approved.
Second.
Any discussion? Seeing none, I'll just thank the chief for bringing this partnership agreement forward, and I'll call the question. All in favor? Opposed? None opposed. The motion carries. We'll next turn to item 14A under correspondence. We have a letter from the Victoria Half Triathlon for the 2021 and a recommendation.
Move the recommendation that refer to staff to work with the organization.
Second.
Any discussion? I'll call the question. All in favor? Opposed? None opposed. The motion carries. Thank you. We have no new business, so we'll turn to item 16, which is correspondence for information.
Move receipt.
Second.
All those in favor? The motion carries unanimous. Thank you. And we'll now turn to item 17, notice of motion, and we do have a notice of motion from Councillor Rintoul.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Prior to moving the motion, I guess I would look to council's permission to move the motion this evening and have it raised as opposed to at our next meeting. And I suggest that with respect to the timeline and the recent recommendation coming from the EAC. By way of background, you recollect that on September the 14th, Council referred a matter to the EAC for their input and consideration. And that item was that staff be directed to research options to winterize sidewalk cafes and lineup spaces. And that matter was discussed at the EAC, and they had made a subsequent recommendation back to Council that I would like to see us deal with this evening. And so for starters, I'd like to move that Council be agreeable to addressing this motion this evening.
Okay. Actually, if you could read the motion first, Councillor, and then we will consider the second request.
Sure. I move and the EAC recommends that Council instructs staff to work with the SBIA and Chamber to reach out to local businesses in order to solicit feedback on what might be deemed helpful and appropriate options to winterize outdoor spaces, and in doing so, providing the SBIA and Chamber with a summary of options that might be possible and within the legislative parameters of the community charter.
Thank you. So we do know that in our council procedures bylaw that a notice of motion read at one meeting goes to the agenda on the next meeting. However, we do have circumstances such as urgent business, and this did arise out of the meeting of the EAC last Friday, and those minutes are not yet prepared to come before council. Hence, Councillor Rintoul's notice of motion, and Councillor, you have a motion to consider this evening.
Yes, so moved.
I'll second.
Motion seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? None opposed. The motion carries.
So again, I will read the motion and then I'll have some comments. We have a seconder, Mr. Mayor.
No, it is. Oh, sorry. Go ahead. Yep.
I move and the EAC recommends that Council instruct staff to work with the SBA and Chamber to reach out to local businesses in order to solicit feedback on what might be deemed helpful and appropriate options to winterize outdoor spaces, and in doing so, provide the SBIA and Chamber with a summary of options that might be possible and within the legislative parameters of the community charter.
Second.
Second.
All those in favor? The motion carries. Thank you. Thank you. So we have no motion to go in camera this evening. I'll look for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor? The motion carries. Thank you. Good evening, colleagues.